Summer in the city means different things to different people, of course. A time to escape from the concrete jungle, a free concert in the park, or a plunge in the pool. If that plunge happens to be at the Metropolitan Recreation Center in Williamsburg, you better check the schedule before you pack your suit. Because the pool has scheduled gender-segregated swim hours, a policy that may be getting the Parks Department in hot water.
Well, Hasidic Judaism bars men and women from swimming together, but a public pool in Williamsburg and Brooklyn does, but at a public pool in Brooklyn, does religious freedom outweigh gender discrimination? Here to answer that and more are New York Civil Liberties Union Senior Staff Attorney, Erin Beth Harris. Welcome to BK Live.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you, and we're also happy to welcome a writer from Gothamist. She is Emma Whitford. Thanks for being here on the story,
Thanks for
Emma.
having me.
And we're happy to welcome back a face you may remember on BK Live, Ezra Friedlander. He's an advocate for the Hasidic community. Thanks for coming back, Ezra.
Again,
Clarify.
I'm not an advocate. I'm a citizen, a taxpayer,
That
and
as
I
well.
live in Brooklyn. I live in Borough Park.
Awesome.
I speak only for myself. If people agree with me, that's an added bonus.
Okay.
Well, we
let's
can
get you a
follow
question then.
right back up on that. A New York Times editorial called this matter of a religious intrusion into a secular space. So what are your thoughts on that, Ezra?
I don't see it that way. I believe women who are not Hasidic can avail themselves of this gender separate gender hour for women. I believe there are many women. I've actually spoken to some secular women, Jewish but secular, who have told me had they known or if they would live in that particular geographical area, they would avail themselves.
Yeah.
I don't think we should bring in the word religion. Many women would like to carve out a little private time where men are not present. We can do the same for the men in case they're intimidated by women as well. And society, generally speaking, has always allowed for separate facilities for men and women. We see that in restrooms. You have a men's bathroom and a women's bathroom. Why?
Well, Emma,
same resident.
before we get into the theoretical topics of men versus women's restrooms, let's talk about the facts of the case and why this is a story that you guys have reported on at Gothamist.
Sure. So just to be clear to start, the New York Post wrote a piece about the Metropolitan Pool in Williamsburg late last month. And there's a lot of confusion surrounding what went on. As we understand it, there were some women who have long attended the Metropolitan Pool, which since the 90s has been offering this courtesy 3 times a week in the mornings. And they heard from some staff at the pool that come June 11th, the policy was going to be suspended. And the Parks Department position is that they never condoned that, and that no official policy change can take place unless it's coming from the top down, like the Parks Department proper, because they oversee all these indoor pools in the city. So what happened was, it turned out, I also talked to someone at the Human Rights Commission, and it turns out that they had received an anonymous complaint earlier this year that had alerted them to the existence of this courtesy. And their position is that it may be in violation of the New York City human rights law, which prohibits discrimination based on race, gender, creed.
I see a lawyer shaking her head.
I agree with you, Emma, on that. I mean, I think it is very clear that the New York City human rights law prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex or gender in public accommodations. There is no doubt that this particular space is a public accommodation, and that creating gender-segregated spaces is simply prohibited under that law.
So one man's courtesy or one woman's courtesy is another person's discrimination/segregation.
That's correct. I mean, there's a reason that we have these public accommodations laws, and that's because the city wants to create an open space for everybody. We cannot be biased on the basis of our race, on the basis of gender, on the basis of sex, and you can't start making individual accommodations on the basis of individual beliefs, because that is exactly what creates inequality and unequal access on a broader basis.
But hasn't this been the sort of status quo for at least a decade?
That's my understanding, yes. I had not been aware of this problem until the recent reporting.
There has always been an accommodation. I can't respond to the legal argument because I'm not an attorney. But you see, a public school is open on certain days and closed on certain days because of a certain accommodation. One could make the argument, I'd like to send my child to school on Rosh Hashanah or on Ramadan. Because the city makes that accommodation based on a religious calendar, that doesn't mean that you're discriminating against my child. Here, this is not a religious, this is a more of an equal protection regarding men and women.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's a religious.
But to be fair, you know that it is happening in this neighborhood because there is a specific community that's being accommodated because that's the separation, and those are the people who overwhelmingly benefit from it.
And we see in other parts of the country where there's a
but
large...
we're working from that conceit, though. Like, we're going to work from there.
Correct. But again, you could make the same argument. I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but you should carve out a men's-only hour, and it's equal. And you don't obviously need to label it religious because, in fact, it's not religious.
Right.
It's more of a social, carve-out, privacy. We do see in society today where women are asking for more private space. This could be classified as such. We see gender, we see separate in gym, certain gym regulations have men and women.
Okay, so to that point, Erin, they've got the Lucille Roberts showing me commercials all day where I can't come to their gym. There's ladies' nights, there's get in for free. Even the car wash gives you half off if you happen to be a woman. So why aren't people going after them instead of women who just want a time to swim?
Well, they absolutely could go after them for some of those particular policies. Now, obviously, not everything that you just listed would necessarily count as a public accommodation.
Right.
What's very important about this is our human rights law recognizes that in the context of, say, employment, you have religious accommodations, but this is public accommodations. You have a choice to go and enter this facility. As we all know, separate is not equal, and that is what creating separate times and spaces for men and women can create, just the same way that it would on the basis of race or certain other protected characteristics that our society recognizes.
Now, before we move on, I do understand that we have a statement from Councilmember Dov Hiken.
Assemblymember Dov Hiken was going to be on the program earlier, but he actually sent a statement we're going to share with you on the full screen right now, but it reads in part that he's thrilled that the Williamsburg community can continue to take advantage of separate gender swimming hours, and it's a major victory for human rights, and he wants to thank Mayor de Blasio for his swift action in resolving the matter, and that we can remember to be culturally sensitive and accepting of different cultures, that I'm paraphrasing there. But going to you now, Emma, is this a tempest in a teapot? Are people in the neighborhood in a tizzy about this, or was it simply one, presumably, guy calling up and saying, hey, I want to swim Sunday morning too?
Well, you know, so I talked to a few people who attend a different pool. So I talked to Assemblymember Hiken as well.
Right.
And he said, you know, full disclosure, I haven't spoken with any of the women who use the Williamsburg pool. Okay. He says that he's spoken to many of them. And he says revoking the policy would be akin to saying that these women can no longer swim. You know, if there's not a time that allows them to swim in a modest way, then they won't be able to do it. And in a community where, you know, these women don't have as many outlets for leisure, perhaps, as some other women in New York City who don't have such strict sort of religious guidelines to their lives, like this is like a really good thing. So that was what he was saying. And then I spoke to a gentleman who attends a different swimming pool, the St. John's Recreation Center in Bed-Stuy, which also serves a sizable ultra-Orthodox community. And in his position, the hours are slightly different there. The accommodating hours are in the evenings after work, whereas at Williamsburg, they appear to be in the mornings during the day. So there might be a little bit more of a conflict in terms of people who work 9 to 5s, you know, you want to go in the evening. Right. But then he was like, well, that's one day a week. So, you know, I can understand the accommodation. That's what he was saying.
Look, in the grand scheme of things, I believe that the ACLU, which does good work in many areas.
Specifically NYC.
In many areas. You know, as the son of a rabbi, I recall my father telling me as a kid, the Code of Jewish Law has 4 volumes, but the 5th one is the most important one, and that's common sense. Yes, you could litigate something. In the grand scheme of things, with what's going on planet Earth today, this is not something we should focus on. A little accommodation. We recognize in society today that we need to be very sensitive towards minorities. Minorities, not only minorities in terms of African American or Latino, but we have now even a movement just recently, I haven't been following it, but even that men who identify as women or women as men could use bathrooms of men's or women. I'm not getting into that whole argument.
We could talk about that.
Right. I don't want to get into it.
Are there minorities that use these pools as well?
Absolutely. Women, this is not a specific Hasidic swimming hour. This is for women only.
Yeah, a lot of religions priests
it has nothing to do with
talk
religion.
about modesty,
it
but
could also mean
the
culturally.
core of the question is what other cultures or religious groups are taking advantage of these pool
I have spoken
hours.
to women who are secular, who applaud this, and who feel that society should allow and carve out an accommodation for women only swimming.
So, Erin, to the point, we're going to go to Erin now, but if we're talking about New York as a city, and it does make sense if we're all sharing the small island together, to Ezra's point, if it's been going on all this time, why stop it now? And no one's complaining, really. There was anonymous complaint. And it really, to make sense, respect the neighborhood and the culture of the neighborhood. Why can't we just not involve lawyers?
Well, you have to think about what the purpose of the human rights law is. And if you start making accommodations for some people based on some beliefs, what about other people's beliefs about certain things that would also impact that space? I mean, the reason that the human rights law exists is to create that equal access. And once you start picking at it a little bit here, a little bit there, where does it go? Yes.
All right.
But we see for the last several decades, when this policy has been in place, that we don't see women all over the city demanding women's only hour. For those that require that because of a religious need, because of a cultural requirement, let's be a little sensitive. Let's be accommodating. Let's understand that we have 8 million people in this great city that speak, 175 different languages. Let's be accommodating. And if it inconveniences us just a little bit, let's check the box. Have I been sensitive? Have I been friendly?
This is going to be the final word.
Yeah, no, very last thing. I just think it's important to note that this could have a larger implication, because I've spoken with the official spokesperson for the Parks Department, and they say that the way they're planning to resolve this, they're talking to the Human Rights Commission, is to have a citywide policy. So it sounds like something small is going to impact all the.
She's shaking her head over here, by the way.
But it could be, it could be citywide ban on gender-specific hours, or it could be a citywide establishment of gender-specific hours.
And we're completely out.
And I'm predicting that this will be welcomed by people all across the city. Mark my words on it.
Out of time.
That prediction, it's on the record.
Surely.
Thank you for being here, and we'll definitely keep watching this and talking to our neighbors.